well, come on up. And he literally, he buzzed us in, and all 18 of us are all filing, they're filing past me. I'm holding the door, and then this other guy walks up who lived there, and he goes, where are you guys off to? I said, well, the guy in such and such, number 2 flat, just invited us up. We just pushed the bell. He doesn't know us. He goes, well, I don't know him either. I just moved here 2 weeks ago. I don't know any of my neighbors. I said, well, then come with us. And he came with us, and the guy at number 2 flat opened his door, and he's holding this baby, and his wife is standing behind him, holding a baby. And they were nice as pie. They let us in. The wife made us some tea. We hung out with them for about an hour, talking about our night. And there was a couple sort of synchronicities between some of the people in the group and this husband and wife. And it's things like this that, once again, we could have got to that point downstairs and just thought, okay, we'll finish here on this note. To some, it would have seemed like an anticlimax. But I just thought, no, see, once again, that doubt sets in. Even after them witnessing the whole night, back-to-back synchronicities that showed them the power of this when we learn to let go of controlling things too much, being overly controlling. And we let ourselves have a bit of a play. And we just witness magic after magic. And so I said to him, there's no reason why we can't explore, even when it seems like a dead end. That is, once again, just the quick conditioning of the mind to judge the situation. That's a closed heart and a closed mind. That's going to lead to a low-quality experience. When we can open our minds, when we can open our hearts, that leads to high-quality experiences. At any given moment, we can decide to let our mind stay closed or open. At any given point, we can keep our heart closed or we can open it. To me, I don't think there's anything natural about having closed hearts. It might have become normal for us to become such fearful people of strangers. But that is not a good enough reason not to love, our fellow human being. Just because they're a stranger and just because we have a bit of fear is not a good enough reason to shut down. It is not a good enough reason to withdraw. It is not a good enough reason to say to even the closest people in our lives, unless you behave in a certain way, I'm not going to love you. We all have our fears. We all have things that stand in the way of us having very open, close relationships, meaningful lives. We all have fear. This is everybody's story. That story is not who, what, and what we are. Who and what we are is something much more phenomenal than that. It's just through the conditioning of our lives we become much more closed down. And this is why I love synchronicity so much, because it is there, once again, sometimes serving as a trickster to show us you're taking yourself too seriously. You're taking your life far too seriously. You're not being open enough, and therefore, because you're not being open enough, you're not seeing something that's right in front of your face. There's a phenomenon that was witnessed by Captain Cook, one of the great European explorers with the tall sailing ships. When he visited a couple of the islands in the South Pacific, some of the South Pacific islanders, and I want you to just imagine yourself there as one of those islanders. So anyhow, Captain Cook rocks up in this very big European tall sailing ship. A ship that was so far outside of their current experience. They had small canoes. They had nothing like it. So much to the point, because they weren't expecting it, they didn't see it. This big, tall European sailing ship sitting in the bay, sitting hundreds of meters from the island itself, and the islanders didn't see it. It's reported in the captain's log that the islanders were just going about their daily business. They had taken no notice of the ship whatsoever when it came up. The moment the Europeans got into the small rowboats and started rowing to the shore, suddenly the islanders took notice. Because their small rowing boats were equal in size to their canoes, it was within their belief system structure. They had what's called a negative hallucination with the big ship. They couldn't see it because it was too far outside of their belief system. They had belief system blindness. The small canoes, the small rowing boats, they could see those, and suddenly they took notice. The one person, the first person on one of these islands that was able to see the big tall sailing ship was one of the shamans. Why? Because it's the shaman's job to be open to exotic phenomena. It's the shaman's job to be open to mystical experiences. He was the first one to see the ship. He then, in his own way, communicated to his peoples what was there, and eventually everyone was able to see the big tall sailing ship, but they trusted this shaman. He was their message bringer. It's kind of like us. We all have a message bringer inside, but for a lifetime, the ego is the voice that we hear first. It is the voice that shouts the loudest. That's not the message bringer, the true message bringer within us. So like us, we all get this belief system blindness. If we have too strong of a belief about how things are, we miss things that go right on underneath our nose. How many times have you looked for things like your keys and you couldn't find them? You swore blind. You put them in a place. And because that was your belief, you missed seeing them 2 or 3 times sweeping through the house. They were right under your nose the whole time. Synchronicity has that power, once again, to open us up like a cosmic can opener. To remind us that we have more inside of us. To remind us that reality is not a series of belief systems. It is not a series of metaphors. We create our own personal realities moment by moment with our thoughts, with our feelings, with our emotions. Every thought, every feeling, every emotion triggers our actions, our behaviors. Our behaviors literally create our lives. When people talk about things like the law of attraction or manifestation, this is an inward process. We sometimes look around us, and again, the ego has this weird, warped sense of reality where it's always looking for people's faults. It's always looking for something to blame. It's not looking for someone's innocence. It's looking for their differences. It's looking for a way to create more separation because the ego is the master of separation. My partner, Sky, she doesn't have a pleasant relationship with her father. We stayed with them over the last few days. And they have 2 very big poodles, really large poodles. And the father, has grown to really adore these dogs. And so anyhow, he came home from work yesterday when we were there. And Sky pretty much my partner Sky came bouncing up to him, excited to see him, put her arms around him, and he pretty much just sort of was like, gave her a basic little hug and then sort of pushed her away to a degree because he was so closed down. The dogs came next. They leapt up, they jumped all over him. He smiled, suddenly his energy came alive. He embraced the dogs, he was so happy. Why? Because in his mind, he sees the dogs as innocent. In his mind, deep down, subconsciously, he sees his daughter and he issues blame. Blame for maybe having to work a job that he had to work when she was just a wee child, that he didn't like to work, and that he had a racist boss, and he didn't like being there. And so maybe not consciously did he have this anger. Not consciously did he have these, this sort of resentment. But it's there in his actions, it's there in his body language. He's looking for faults, but not in the dogs. He sees only innocence. How many times in our lives do we do that to the closest people to us? Just because it's become automatic, we've become automatized. Not to question why we are so closed down to those closest to us. This is, again, what I love about synchronicity. If you can trust that there is this inner guidance system, when you get off your path, let's say right now in your life you're feeling a little bit lost. Like your car's sat-nav. Whenever you sort of go one road too far or take the wrong turn, what do when you're trusting your sat-nav? You don't suddenly, after it recalibrates, say, I don't trust this. And it's already recalibrated and it's showing you, look, if you just simply now take a right, this is your course correction, you'll get to where you're going. You have your own inner sat-nav. But how many times do we use our free will to make our own choices that scupper those inner messages? We have that inner sat-nav. From my perspective, after sort of having all these synchronicity walks, after tracking this stuff since I was a teenager on my long hitchhiking journeys, I've learned to deeply trust it. When it recalibrates and maybe suddenly I'm rushing to catch the bus and the bus drives off without me because I was seconds too late and I'm already late for something, I've now learned to maybe at first go, shit, damn, fuck, and I let it all out, and then I calm back down, get back into a point where I feel some balance and trust, and I just realize, okay, let's see where this goes. I'm already late, but this is, based on ego stuff. let's get into my true self. Let's see where this goes. I'll wait for the next bus. And then sure enough, somebody comes up, waiting for the next bus, because I'm a very open person. I'm quite happy to talk to people. Maybe that's my American upbringing. I'm quite easily going to just start blabbering away. And suddenly, you're talking to somebody and you have a connection. You have some sort of shared interest and you're in the same club. And, or maybe they needed to hear something you had to say, or maybe they had something for you. Because in each moment, we are always teacher and student, always. It's just whether or not our ego gets in the way of experiencing that. So when I was younger, and I used to hitchhike when I was a teenager, I remember setting off when I was 17 years old. I quit school. I didn't even get all the way through high school. I had 1 year left, and I just couldn't be there any longer. I just felt like there was just too much friction between my stepfather and me. So there was a lot of pain there that was being caused to my mother as well because of the poor relationship between me and my father. I wasn't doing very good in school because I probably had dyslexia amongst other sort of stuff going on, and I just couldn't pay much attention to what was, being spoken. If I could have mastered in daydreaming, I'd have aced it, no problem. Always staring out the window, wishing I was somewhere else. Wondering if I'm in the right time, to be honest. Should I be born 50 years from now? So anyhow, I left home at an early age and went hitchhiking. I remember the very first time I went hitchhiking, I had all these bags. I probably had way more than I should have had hitchhiking. I remember standing on the motorway entrance ramp, and this guy pulls over, and he parked maybe 50 yards up the way, because I guess he wasn't expecting to see me there, and he parked, and I had to run to him. And as I'm running to him, I'm wondering, is this guy a serial killer? All that fear. But that's the doubt that was right there, trying to set in to sabotage my hitchhiking journey before it even got started. We all are aware of self-sabotage. We do it to ourselves all the time. So even at that young age, I just thought, okay, let it go. The guy, I'm sure he's not a serial killer. And I got in. He said, where are you going? I said, I'm going to Alaska. And he looked at me funny. He goes, you know how far that is? I was like, yeah, it's a couple thousand miles. It was probably like 7,000 miles. It was a long ways. And I had $10 US to my name. That's about 6 pounds currently in pounds. And that's all I had. But once again, there was something in me at that young age to say, look, you can trust this will work out. You can trust that if you just have the courage to do this, you'll be fine. 17 years old, in a stranger's car, with less than 6 pounds to my name, and a bunch of luggage. And being raised and growing up in Florida, I was a typical Florida boy. So I had, shorts down to about here. I had typical sort of tennis shoes, would call them tennis shoes in America, just, sort of flat shoes. T-shirt, I had a jacket tucked away in one of the bags. And here I am going to Alaska looking like I should be, staying in Florida. And so anyhow, after a few lifts, I'm way up north. I'm up near Wisconsin? Yeah, Wisconsin. Or Minnesota, one of the two. I think it was Minnesota, which is one of the states that borders Canada. And I was still maybe half a state away, so still a few hundred miles. And suddenly it's getting cold. This wasn't in the summertime, it's just in Florida. It's usually quite warm year-round, and usually, I can easily bear it. Even over here, I wear shorts a lot of the time. So suddenly, though, I'm standing on the side of the motorway after the last guy dropped me off, and I'm thinking, it's getting cold. My thumb was the first thing to feel it, because I'm sitting there with my thumb out in the air, and the cold is getting to it. And so every now and again, I'd take this hand, and I'd put it under my arm, and do this, and then put this one in, hitchhike some more. And I just kept thinking to myself, I really need some gloves. But it wasn't like a desperation to it. It was like, I just knew it was something I needed. And see, the thing about synchronicity, like I said earlier, it's not a process. It's something that happens in an instant. It's just like manifestation. You can't really distinguish between the two of them, because same with manifestation, it is not a process. It doesn't play by earthly human rules. It is a phenomena that works in an instant. It does not require a long, drawn-out process to work. It is always working. It's just whether or not we're seeing the connections that are already there to get us to where we want to be, to meet the people we need to meet, to have the resources we need for a project. All that stuff is there. It's just our beliefs in the system blindness that's standing in the way of exploring and experiencing any of that stuff that's always there. So anyhow, I'm standing there on the side just visualizing, and I'd never at that young age, that was back in something like 1987, I think it was, I didn't have any idea of something called the law of attraction. This just, things felt right. And I was just holding this vision in my head of me standing on the side of the road with gloves and warm thumbs. And the next guy that picked me up after I'm sort of holding this vision in my head, I'm telling him, about my story about hitchhiking up, and I'm going to Alaska, and he thought I was a bit, crazy, and I said to him, yeah, everything's fine, because the only thing is, it's just my thumbs, I stand on the side of the road hitchhiking, my thumb gets cold. And he literally just punches his glove box, opens up, and out rolls this pair of gloves. He goes, take them, they're yours. I was like, no way, man. He's like, wait, man. I was like, okay, fine, I'll take them. And I thanked him, and he dropped me off at the next point where he was going this way, and I was going that way. And I got it back on the motorway, and I had my gloves, and I had my gloves out, and my thumb out. I was like, perfect. Warm, toasty thumbs. This is good stuff. And then suddenly I felt my ears, because my thumbs were now happy, I could now feel the cold nipping at my ears, and I was like, shit. And suddenly this vision of a big Russian hat, the ones with the pull-down sides, all fluffy inside, suddenly came into my mind. I was thinking, yeah, I could use one of those. And I was just really sort of nonchalant about it. Sometimes when we wish for stuff, it's almost like the wish, there's that part of our sub-personalities, or that inner egotistical self that gets in the way when we ask for stuff because we're not worthy, we're not good enough. But sometimes it's like when we wish, it's like that part doesn't take it seriously, and therefore it doesn't get in the way. That's why I think why we have the expression, watch what you wish for. So anyhow, I'm just standing there in this sort of wish mode, if you like. Just nonchalant about it. Yeah, that'd be cool, big Russian hat. I promise you, the very next guy that picked me up, I'm in the car with him, and I'm telling him about the gloves and my thumbs, and they're all happy, and then suddenly I'm ears, and I was saying, yeah, I could do this with one of these big Russian hats. He reached into the back seat, pulled out this big Russian hat. And literally my mouth was and he goes, take it. And it's like, really? He goes, yes, take it, it's yours. It was meant to be yours, obviously. And so I was full of gratitude. I took it, put the hat on, got out of the car, and I was standing there with my hat nice and cozy, and with my thumbs nice and warm. And then suddenly I realized I'm still in shorts, for God's sake. And there was now ice on the ground. And so I had my jacket on, had my hat, had my gloves, but I'm standing around in shorts and these shoes with no socks. And they were flat shoes, just a bit of rubber. And the cold is really coming through from the road. The next guy picks me up. Didn't have any boots or anything for me, didn't even ask. He was just explaining stuff. And he goes, where are you heading? I said, Alaska. And he goes, well, there's a youth hostel coming up on the border here. I can drop you there if you like. It's getting dark. You might as well stay the night. I was like thinking about my financial situation and thinking that's probably going to be all my money if I do that. But I thought, I got to stay somewhere. So I trusted. I went to the youth hostel. I had just enough money. It was $10 for the night. I had $10, so I gave him the $10. And I had some packed food with me. And I was sitting down in the canteen eating, and the manager of the hostel came in. He was just being friendly, asking me where I'm going. I said, I'm going to Alaska. And he's kind of just looking me over. And I'm just thinking, what's he up to? What's he doing? What's he want? And he said, do you have any better shoes than that? And I said, no, this is all I've got. And he goes, okay, wait here. And he disappeared, and he came back a few minutes later with these brand new pair of boots. And he put them down on the floor next to me. He said, they just appeared like 2 weeks ago. Somebody handed them in. I mean, they were brand spanking new. And he said, if they're your size, just take them. And I took on my shoes and I put them on, and they were perfectly my size. He says, 2 weeks ago, they just appeared out of nowhere. Now, this brings us to a deeper nature, the true nature of the universe. You might hear sometimes Buddhists say things like, reality, isn't quite what it seems. Time and space are an illusion. Obviously, they're not saying this level of reality is an illusion to the sense that it's not real to us. It is very real to us. But to another version of you, a parallel version of you, you could call it your guides, you can call it your higher self, you can call it whatever you want to call it, your soul. Another version of you, another part of you in a parallel reality, from that vantage point, this may not seem very real. This may seem like a hologram. It may seem like a virtual reality program, and it's not taking it as serious as we are because we're the ones here in the experience, embedded fully in it, having the direct experience. Experiencing the pain, experiencing the suffering, experiencing the happiness, experiencing the joy, whatever we're getting from the moment. And so, I have these boots, and it just made me laugh. And I remember going to bed that night thinking, this is just absolutely crazy. The lessons that I had from Florida to Alaska, in just that short few days, completely changed my thinking about reality. It was literally digging in deeply beyond that hypnosis, that trance that we're all in, that we're walking around as if we're not really here, we're not very present. This is why we get angry with each other so much. We get angry at something for something they did 5, 10 seconds ago, an hour ago, 2 hours ago. It's in the past, and we're not being in the present. If you're being in the present, why are you going to be mad at him? The present is an egoless state. Ego is a loveless state of the mind. If you are in the present, you're not in your ego. Because literally the present is an egoless moment. That is why the ego is constantly battling with the present moment. It wants you to think about the past. It wants you to think about the probable future. Because if you're there in the moment, it doesn't exist. And it's there to protect itself. And this is why we find it hard to stay present. Because it's constantly battling against the present. And so I'm there in the youth hostel on that night, just thinking to myself, you know what? I don't understand what those unseen forces were that got me safely from Florida to here. That gave me that guy that gave me the food 2 states back that I'm now eating now. The guy that gave me the hat when I needed the hat. I wasn't questioning that stuff. I was just in deep gratitude. And you know what I was doing? I was there being grateful, saying thank you, thank you. More please. That's how grateful I was. That's how open that I was. That's how much I trusted that more please was appropriate. There was nothing in me that was thinking that this is limited. That at any given time the universe is going to say, all right, we've had enough of this guy, let him freeze to death and die. I didn't figure anything like that was going to happen. I felt safe. I probably felt safer than when I was in my parents' house, where the fridge was always full of food, and I could get pocket money if I begged enough. The universe was literally providing for me. So anyhow, the next day comes, and there's literally a foot of snow on the ground. And I remember thinking, what the fuck? What happened to all that? I better understand the phenomena now, because that's that trickster elements of synchronicity. That's that part that's right there in that moment where suddenly you seem like the butt end of a universal joke. You're like, that's when it wants to see if you're going to stay present. It's almost like this test. Not a test of, is he going to fail? But a test, is he ready to keep going with this? And I just looked at the snow and I thought, you're having a laugh. And I decided I wasn't going to go into Canada because I really felt, okay, I may not be prepared. Doubt set in. I headed back down into the lower 48 states, went out to California where it was warm instead. But I got back into that flow. And even if, for the first couple of hours in that day, if I was a little bit sad, I was moping around a little bit thinking, what was the point of all that, just get all the way up there and then a foot of snow and da-da-da-da-da, going into a new country that I've never been into. I don't know anything about Canadians. I know they're, they're like our little brothers, but I don't know what they're like for real. They like to say fucking A all the time. That's all I knew. And so I thought, no, it's an unknown. It was too much fear. And so I went the other way. So within the first few hours, I still got lifts, but they were grumpier lifts. They were people that were just on a bit of a grump. And I look back at that now and I think, you know what? That flow that people talk about, it's not like that flow ever stops. It's not like it just sort of disappears. It's literally... Yeah, sure. Can you ask whoever has bicycles in the no smoking shed, this is bicycles, is it? Bicycles in the no smoking shed to please remove them. Directly. So, I'm now getting lifts from people that seem very grumpy because I was in a grumpy mood. And again, I didn't understand the mechanics of this stuff when I was younger. I can look back now with hindsight, but I didn't understand what was going on. But nevertheless, it didn't mean I wouldn't synchronize. It didn't mean synchronicity still wouldn't work. It's just I was in a completely different vibration of flow. I was in that sort of flow with people who were in a bit of a mood. It's just like misery likes company. So I was flowing with other people who were slightly miserable. But it didn't mean we weren't synchronized. We were synchronized, but on a slightly different vibration. When my mood lifted, the people that I seemed to attract to me also seemed to change. And again, the attitudes changed and things changed all around. And I got back into a flow that seemed more enjoyable, less painful. And so it was those sort of things that became my learning grounds with synchronicity and manifestation. It taught me something really powerful. And so, sort of coming back to the trickster synchronicity, this is one, again, something that sometimes suddenly the synchronicity just seems to stop. Or again, like I said, you seem to be the butt end of a universal joke. It's just like you're following the breadcrumb trail and suddenly, the last few breadcrumbs are taken away and you're just like, what do I do now? Why was it so easy and now why is it getting difficult? We're doubting ourselves. it's us that are removing ourselves from that flow. Nothing else is doing it. The synchronicity is just there, laughing, yes, and probably at us, because, again, it doesn't play by our rules. It doesn't have to laugh in any other manner. So anyhow, I remember an experience I had here in London just about 2 years ago. I give a lot of talks down in London, and I gave a talk for one group one night, and I had one of my friends with me who's a fruitarian. All he eats is fruit. That's all he eats. And so I gave the talk, and he was going to stay at my place for the night, so we're on the London Underground going back home, and we're standing up because there are no available seats, and he's from the provinces, he's from way out in the country, and he didn't realize there's no bins on the Underground because of all the IRR terrorist stuff back in the days. And so he pulls out this apple from, he's always wearing these army sort of pants, and he's got pockets everywhere and fruit-filled pockets. And he pulled out this apple that looked like it had seen much better days. And he looked around for a bin, and he goes, "Is there a bin anywhere, Todd?" And I said, first I was about to say no, and then suddenly instinct took over. It was literally this playful thought came in my head, and I looked, and there was this guy sat there with his brand new shopping bag, his Selfridges shopping bag. Big yellow, firm, sturdy looking bag full of stuff. And I said to my friend, I said, "There's a bin right there." And my friend looked at me and looked at the bag and goes, "Todd, that's somebody shopping." I said, no, that is a bin bag. Put your apple in there." And I was only playing. I didn't expect him to do it. And he didn't do it. And he kept complaining. He goes, "No, Todd, that's some guy's shopping bag." And he was looking at me as if all my morals suddenly escaped me. And I was like, "Trust me, it's the shopping bag." And he took his apple and he put it back in his pocket, and it's just oozing down his leg. And I was like, "Okay, fine." The moment he put it back in his pocket and he stood up straight, the guy who owned the Selfridges bag, projectile vomits all over himself, all over the bag, all over the immediate vicinity, and we're both standing there with our jaws wide open. The guy across from the woman sitting got out her bag, and she pulls out some wet wipes and she hands them to him, and he's like sort of wiping himself down. And he pulls out this brand new box of shoes from the bag, and he's wiping that down, and she gives him this Tesco bag, and he puts his brand new shoes in the Tesco bag and puts it next to him, and he looks at this Selfridges bag. The guy just looks at it with disgust and disdain, and he takes his foot and he goes, "Ugh," and he kicks it out into the middle. I nudge my friend, I say, "See, it is a bin bag." Now, again, okay, I'm a powerful manifestor, but I didn't do that to the poor chap, okay? What actually happened is, once again, that's that trickster synchronicity. I wasn't taking myself seriously. My friend was taking himself a little bit seriously. He was definitely taking me seriously because there was no playing whatsoever. He didn't go, he was like, "Todd." He was very dead serious, taking me seriously. And literally synchronicity, what happened was, because I'm so used to feeling these little vibrations, feeling that sort of nudge, or feeling butterflies or hair stand on the back of my neck at just the right moments, I trust certain stuff and I say certain stuff at just the right, and it's like perfect timing. There was literally a part of me on another level of reality that probably knew this guy was about to barf. And it was just a moment to be playful. I didn't make the guy throw up. It was just so perfectly synchronized. That is what synchronicity is. It's the synchronicity, it's a synchronicity occurrence of time and space. And it was perfect. And it literally just, my friend and I got off the train and we couldn't stop thinking about it. It was just such a powerful moment. Perfectly timed. And these things, they're just there and they happen naturally. Always, if we're just ready to look at the signs. Speaking of signs, also a couple years ago, so when I was young, I hitchhiked for about 5 years before I came to the UK, and I went everywhere. And so every year here, as an adult, I still go hitchhiking for once a year for 2 weeks, at least 2 weeks. And so a couple years ago, I decided, okay, I'm going to do something different this year. So if I'd go hitchhiking, and if I wanted to get from Tampa, Florida to Washington, D.C., or from London to Leeds, I would hold up a sign that says Leeds on it. If I'm standing by the motorway, obviously a lot of people can look at it and think, "Oh, I'm not going that way," or "I'm turning off in the next few exits." You're eliminating them straight away. And that's a good thing, because if you're in a hurry, then you can hopefully get somebody who's going to Leeds, pick you up, and you get one lift all the way there. And that makes a lot of sense, hitchhiking. So anyhow, on this synchronicity hitchhiking trip, I asked myself, I wonder how far I can push this stuff. So I decided I'm just going to take my passport, I'm going to take my bank card, but I'm going to put a limited amount of money in it, into the savings account that's attached to it, or current account that was attached to it, put everything else in the savings, and that way I knew I had a limited supply of money that I could not depend on. I had to trust that deeper part that I did when I was younger once again. And then I decided, I came up with the idea, okay, I'll have hitchhiking boards, signs like I used to, but I'm not going to put destinations, because I have no destination in mind, therefore I don't need to control where I go. I don't need to control the outcome at all. So the first sign I made up was quite quirky. Some of you may not get it right away, some of you might. I wrote astral planes. Okay? It's just a terminology used within out-of-body exploration where we think, you know, it's the afterlife communities and we go to visit the astral planes in our sleep, blah, blah, blah. So anyhow, I wrote astral planes. Now, immediately that's going to count out a lot of people who's driving by, because a lot of people are looking at that, astral planes, I don't know what that is, you know, and they're just going to keep driving. But that was the key. I didn't want to just have everyday conversation. I wanted somebody to pick me up where we could go deep straight away. We could get past the small talk, we could just go straight into the deep end of consciousness. And so, very first occurrence of this, I got on the London Underground, I took the train as far out as it was go, because it's not easy hitchhiking from inner London, so I got the train as far out as I could go, and I got off the train, I went and stood on the motorway, holding up this sign, and it was just the motorway entrance, and this guy slows down, rolls down his window, and he goes, and it was on the south side of London, and he said, "Are you trying to get to Gatwick Airport?" And I was like, "No, dude, wrong kind of planes." And so, but I gauged my intuition right there. Is this right? Does it feel right? And he didn't feel right. He didn't feel like he was my lips. So he drove, I waved him on. I said, "No, that's okay, I'm going to wait a bit longer." And he drove off. And about 5 minutes later, this young lad drove up, opened the door, said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm just sort of heading south, I guess," because that's where the motorway was leading. So he said, "Yeah, I'm heading that way." And so I got in, and within about 5 minutes after the normal pleasantries, he asked me that socially acceptable question, "What do you do for a living?" I was like, "Oh, I teach things like lucid dreaming, out-of-body exploration, stuff like that." And so anyhow, I thought to myself, I won't go in with the out-of-body exploration. That's not everybody's cup of tea. Not everybody has that belief. I said, "Okay, dreaming. We all dream every night, so I can go there." So I said, I teach people how to become consciously awake in their dream while they're still dreaming. So their physical body is physically asleep, and they know they're dreaming, and the dream becomes so hyper-real it even becomes physical, because the dream body is equal in vibration to the dream environment, and the more conscious awareness, the more consciously aware you become within the dream, the more solidified it seems to become too. And it is bright and vivid and can sometimes supersede the quality of physical reality. So I'm explaining all this to him, and I explained, the things you could do. If you have any fears and phobias, you can work on those in your dream. If you want to travel, then you can fly up in the air like Superman or Superwoman and go anywhere you want. Go to the Great Pyramids, have a bit of fun, go and meet people, do whatever you want to do, have fun with dream characters, whatever. And then conversation sort of just went silent. You could see he was just sitting there thinking all this stuff through, and he was just tinkering with it in his head. And then he finally spoke back up. He said, "Okay, well look, let me see if I got this straight." He said, "I'm a mechanic, and I like to tinker with cars, and I like to customize cars. So are you telling me that if I practice this enough, eventually I can become conscious in my dream, I'll become aware I'm dreaming, and then I get to do stuff?" I said, "Yes." He goes, "Okay, so if I become aware I'm dreaming, it could become as real as this suddenly, because my dream body is the same as the dream environment, and my perspective is that I am that dream body. So it'll be that real." I said, "Yes." He goes, "Okay, so if I then had a car, and you're telling me it's also very flexible. If I wanted to change the scenery, I could change it in the blink of an eye." I said, "Yes." I said, "This comes with a lot of practice, but yes, generally, basically, yes." He goes, "Okay, so I like to customize my cars. So if I could suddenly have like a blank canvas of the car, and then I could paint it in my mind, and then I could sort of repaint it and just have a lot of fun, and I can do that." I said, "Yes." And then he went silent again, and then I explained how to actually have lucid dreams. And then he went silent again, and it was coming towards the end of our journey, and he suddenly pulled over, because I was going one way, he was going another, and he literally just turned off the ignition of the car after he pulled over. And he sat there. It wasn't one of these normal things like, "Okay, thank you, bye," and you get out. He literally turned off the car. I knew he wasn't staying there. I knew he was going on somewhere else. And so my intuition was, you got to stay here. You created this. You now have to stay here for a minute. Because he was in deep contemplation. You could tell there was a shift taking place within his consciousness. And I knew I had to stay there. So I stayed there, even through the awkwardness of it, because he was silent, and he was really going deep inside there, and you could feel like there was like a battle going on inside. And suddenly he spoke up and he said, "I've been working as a mechanic at the place I've been working for 2 years. never once have I asked to go home early in 2 years, because I did today. And you could see it was really working on him. Because he knew if he would have stayed at work, would he or would he not have still met me? He knew it. You could see the transformation, the cogs just working away. He was figuring it all out as much as he could. And I said, yeah, you're probably right. And he said, you know what I do when I normally go home after work? He said, I would go home, I'd grab a beer from the fridge, and I'd sit down and play Xbox until it was time for bed. And he says, that's my life. He said, I've never had a conversation like this. He was like maybe 21, 22 years old. Never have I had a conversation like this. He said, my friends and I wouldn't even know how to have a conversation like this. And you could just feel that shift, that powerful shift that was taking place in this guy. And literally a tear ran down his face. And I gave him my card. I said, look, if you need to call me, call me. If you're ever in London, come to one of my workshops, free of charge, no charge, just come. And I left him there, and he eventually drove off. And it was just, that's what happens when we are present with people. When we're being here, in the moment, instead of in our past, where we get pain and suffering, and we're blaming people for this and that, we're blaming ourselves for taking that road instead of that road, and this choice instead of that choice. You know, when we're really properly here in the moment, which again, synchronicity has the power to ground you firmly in the moment. It has that second ability to really remind you that there is this underlying energy to everyday reality. And I find that that's the thing that serves me most here on physical reality. I mean, I may have a different belief system than you, and it doesn't matter if you do. It does not matter. But my belief system is, I have something, we all have something in us that, was here before we were on this level. There's other levels to existence. And I have this belief that I'm not from this world, or nor do I think any of us are. I just think we're here temporarily playing this human sort of game, and then we're back to being whatever we were. And that can be a whole weekend in itself, but, talking about this stuff. But my belief is, I'm not exclusively of this world. There's part of me that is not even in this experience now. There's almost like there's a fragment of me, like a hologram. If you take a true hologram developed in a laboratory sort of environment, and you sort of break the holographic plate, and let's say the holographic plate had imprinted on it, a pattern that would display a rose when you shot a laser onto it. And it would show this full holographic rose. And if you walked around the rose from any angle, it would look real. As real as a rose, a physical rose. It's a hologram. So if you break the plate, the holographic plate, and then you take just the shard, the one piece, and you place it up here, and you shine a laser through it, you're going to get a full reconstruction of that rose. This is how holograms work. All the data is encoded in every part of the hologram. So if you break it off, there's still, all the data is still there. It might become a little bit fuzzy at that point if you shine a laser through it, and you get the recreation of the rose. The rose might be slightly fuzzier than it was previously, but it's still encoded all the information. So I think it's kind of like, us. There is this deeper part of us that is not quite in this experience. We've almost like, it's the mothership. The soul is the mothership. Here we are, we're like a scout ship, and we come here to experience being human. But this isn't who and what we really are. This is only part of what we're doing at the moment, part of what we're being. But it's not our essence. And so when I'm having a kind of a moment where I'm feeling bad and sorry for myself, I think about that and I think, that gives me, a lot of reassurance that this isn't all that I am. There's more. And that part has always got my back. It's just I'm the one that uses my free will to get me into self-fate, in certain moments that maybe weren't the best things to experience if I would have just trusted that inner voice. If I would have just trusted that could see a bigger picture perspective, because time and space to it is an illusion. Therefore, something that seems to be happening now to me, simultaneously, my future might be playing out to that, or at least probable futures, hundreds of thousands of potential futures. All the past that is acted out, from my perspective, it's the past. To that perspective of me that might be sitting outside of human time, human space, all of it can be simultaneously taking place, and therefore it's My past is acting in parallel to my present. My present is acting in parallel to all my potential futures. That's really, to me, it's comforting to realize that there's a part of me that gets to see this bigger picture, and if I can trust it enough, it's already laid out the breadcrumb trail of synchronicity to guide me to where I need to go. And there's not just one trail. There's literally infinite trails to follow. But if I get into this limited mindset that there's only one path for me, it's almost like the ego is getting in the way again and saying, well, if we don't find that path, we're screwed. We're just going to have to do this for the rest of our life instead of what we're meant to do. My real purpose. We all at any given moment can act out our real purpose, because who and what we really are, I think, deep down is loving beings. How many situations on a daily basis are there available for us to act loving? There was a hitchhiking trip I just went on recently. I was going to go on my 2-week annual hitchhiking trip, but I only wound up being 2 days actually on the road. 3 days away from home, but only 2 days actually hitchhiking on the road. The very first woman that picked me up worked for the Ministry of Defense. And so she had some very firm belief systems about reality based on her conditioning of military stuff. She was also a very staunch Christian. And here I am. I was like the classic black sheep within my own family. And she starts talking about sort of gay marriages and stuff like that, and I was just like, it was making me feel uncomfortable, because she was being very, very sort of, sort of racist, sexist, all kinds of stuff. And I just thought, I could get into my ego mind right now, which is not a loving state of mind. I could force my own strong beliefs on her, but you know what's going to happen? It's just going to get her back up, and then she's going to get angry with me. And not only will I be now standing on the side of the road, not getting my lift, but we're going to not have any space to find a place to meet as human beings. So I thought, you know what, I've experienced time and time again where I don't need to force my beliefs on this woman. Just be myself, be my loving self. And so, to lighten it up, I thought, you know what, I'll be loving, I'll use humor. She's in this strong Christian belief system that, gay marriage isn't right. And I said to her, yeah, I'm not sure, I don't know. I had a Christian upbringing myself, and I remember in the Bible, the 10 Commandments in the Old Testament, I don't remember one of the 10 Commandments being, thou shalt not be gay. Just having a laugh. And I said, I do remember there was one about, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's oxen. I said, that's probably about the closest we're going to get. And we both had a laugh. And she lightened up a little bit. And she then understood that, okay, maybe I don't share her belief system, but I wasn't being forceful with mine. I was just willing to sort of have a bit of humor to where we could meet somewhere in the middle. And I kid you not, there was a couple other little transitions. She'd say something, and I would, again, just be loving, and I'd maybe use some humor, and I wouldn't be forceful with any beliefs. But within a short period of time within that lift, she suddenly started being a loving human being again. Because for her whole life, like mine, like yours, we've been conditioned and programmed by society to believe and think and feel and behave in certain ways. And in the military, in the Ministry of Defense, it's got its own ethics, it's got its own, ethos. And that's now new belief systems, new indoctrinations on top of whatever she's already experienced in life. And I was aware of all that. And I thought, you know what? It is not for me to push my beliefs on anybody. So just keep it light. But in a short period of time, this transformation was taking place. We then started talking about social activism. I thought, okay, that's a little bit lighter than what we were talking about. And then she started talking about hippies. And I was like, well, I'm kind of like a hippie in a way. And she said, yeah, these damn hippies, they're just so literal with their love. And I just sat there wanting my mouth to drop open, but thought, no, body language. So I kept my mouth shut, and I just sort of jokingly said to her, I said, how dare they actually be loving? And that was enough for her to realize what she said. Why would we not want to be literal with love? And again, it was just said in a way that where she thought, wait a second, even if she was consciously or unconsciously aware of what was going on, it created this little shift. And by the end of the journey, she literally, one trip practically from where I got on in near London all the way to Wales, to where I was running a workshop the next day, and she dropped me off at where I thought I needed to be dropped off on the motorway, and then I called the guy who was running the workshop and I said, I'm at such and such junction, and he goes, oh, you've gone 20 miles too far. And I was like, oh, that's not a problem. He goes, do you want me to come pick you up? And I was like, no, I'll manage. And he was like, you sure? It's getting dark. And I was like, no, it's fine. I'll get a lift. I trust. It's fine. And he goes, oh, okay, fine. And So I got on the opposite side of the motorway on the entrance ramp, and within a few minutes, this white hire van pulls up. And I can see the driver and passenger as they're coming towards me, and they were Muslim. Straight away I knew they were Muslim. And there was obviously this racist part of me that needs some attention. Suddenly came up and was like, they're Muslims, and I'm American. Ugh, that doesn't go down very well. We bomb them, with our gadgets or our drones. And so I was like, oh shit. So anyhow, the passenger jumps out of the van, opens up the door while it's still kind of moving, and that looks kind of radical to that fearful part of me. And he whips open the sliding side door, and I was thinking to myself, suddenly that radical part, that angry part, that, Muslims was like, that racist bit, it was like, he wants me to go in the back of the van. I was like, I'm not going in the back of the van. It's like, chill out, dude. And he literally just kindly opened up the back of the door so I could put my bag in there. He wasn't asking me to sit back there. So yeah, I put my bag back there, and he shuts up the door. And the next thing I was thinking, does he want me to get in the middle? The three-seater van in the front. And he, without even thinking, he gets in the middle, and he sits there, and I get in, and suddenly that part of me just takes a little bit of a back seat, just thinking, okay, it's all good, it's safe. And then the first words out of this guy's mouth was, please don't stab us. In any situation, where you're expressing fear, the other person has probably got their own fears. And this is why, we're constantly shut down human beings towards each other, because, which one of us is going to let the other off the hook so we can then be off the hook too? It's kind of like, the jailer. The jailer always has to be there along with the prisoners. So he's he's in jail too. When do we let people off the hook? With my partner lets me off the hook far easier than I do with her. So if she does something that upsets me, and she probably will apologize straight away, and I'm still there not letting her off the hook. She'll say sorry, really apologetically, really I know she means it, but there's a part of me that's almost like gripped by this dark force. It's like, no, she has not suffered enough for her guilt. It's like, fuck, man. So anyhow, I'm now in this van, and this guy is obviously, let his own fear out, and the driver then chirped, and he goes, yeah, whatever you do, the rule is you don't stab the driver, because then I will crash. So my fears were now melting away, because these two guys took the lead to help me relax. And I said, back and forth, okay, this and that, and then the driver was like, he goes, you obviously know we're Muslim. And I said, yeah, I kind of twigged that. He goes, we're from Somalia. And he said, what's your first impression of Somalians? What's the media? What's it said to you about Somalians? And he goes, I know what it is, Black Hawk Down. And I said, yes, I have heard of that film, but that's not what first came to mind. He goes, what was it? I said, piracy. He was like, fair enough. He goes, explained the piracy stuff to me. And these two guys were so incredibly spiritual. Every spiritual thing they said to me matched any spiritual belief or insight that I have, but just told in a different way. And whenever they said something that resonated, you could feel those chills that go through you, that know that truth is being spoken, but spoken in a different language, in a different way, through a different style. And it was so powerful. I opened up some food, and we shared my food, and these guys dropped me to the door. They went out of their way, and they dropped me to the door, to where I needed to be. It was as if we were three lost chums from a past life reunited temporarily, just ships passing in the night, but just enough, maybe a favor, sort of given back from another life, who knows. It was just perfect. And I remember, the next day after I gave the workshop, and the following day I got back on the road, and I was supposed to be on that point, after giving the workshop, I had at least another 12 days on the road, just uninterrupted by workshops. It was just pure getting out there. I had my passport, I could just go anywhere, do anything. I had a sign, I had 3 signs in one. I could flip it into different directions. The first one was astral planes again. The other one was, are you dreaming or awake right now? Pick me up for a reality check. And the other one was, abduct me. And I had these dice, these special dice that if I roll one and then a picture comes up that says something like hug people or smile at people. So I had them in combination. So one numbered dice to choose which sign I'd use. 1 to 2 would be this, 3 to 4 would be that, and 5 and 6 would be that signboard. And so I rolled the first dice to get the signboard. Abduct me, cool. And the second one rolled smile at people. I was like, ooh, And so I put up my abduction sign, and I'm just standing there on the side of the road, he's smiling. And it was just a bit of fun, just to keep it light. I knew, you know, a lot of people were, it's not their bag of tricks, they're not going to pick me up, it's no big deal. I've never been to Wales, you know, longer than just driving through to get to Ireland on the ferry. And usually it takes me about 10 minutes on average to get a lift. A lot of people think it probably you just stand out there for a while. No, it takes me about 10 minutes. On this day, it took 4 hours. And it wasn't because of the sign, because I changed the sign several times, and I even put it away several times, so it wasn't the sign. And it got to the point where I thought, you know what, this is where the ego wants to come in. The ego wants to convince you that, you know, something's wrong, things aren't going right, you know, I'm hungry. And I started having doubts, and then suddenly, 3 hours into it, I relaxed, and I thought, think about all the other hitchhiking journeys where this kind of thing happens every now and again. What happens in that moment is this: my ideal ride has probably already been synchronized, but the guy's not on the road yet. If I can get into a state of non-resistance, which is not a fear state, not a state where I'm blaming something or blaming myself or whatever, if I can get into that non-resistant state and just play around, maybe do some juggling on the side of the road, whatever, just to let the time go, just to start to ignore people, plan B. And plan B for me was read. I just started to read. 4-hour mark, this guy pulls over, rolls down his window, and goes, "Where are you going?" And I was like, well, I'm just trying to get out of here. I didn't want to say to him nowhere, because then he might think I'm a serial killer. So I said, well, I'm just trying to get out of here because it's not the best spot. I knew in my mind it was the perfect spot at that moment, but I needed an excuse to him. So I said, anywhere you can drop me will be fine. This is not the best spot. And he goes, okay, get in. I got in. And he said, where are you from? I said, from London. And he goes, oh, really? He goes, I'm just north of there. I'm going to Bedford. Bedford is where we live on our houseboat. And I just thought I'd say London because I didn't think he knew where Bedford was. And he said, yeah, I'm going to Bedford. I goes, my partner and I actually live in Bedford. And he goes, oh, great. You got one lift all the way back home? And I was like, but I'm not going home. And he's like, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm on this hitchhiking trip and synchronicity trip, and I just go places and do stuff, and I follow synchronicity, and I follow the signs of synchronicity. He goes, well, isn't this a sign? One lift all the way home? And I was like, yeah. And I had already told him that my partner was missing me and all this, and I'd only been away a few days, but she was already really missing me. And he goes, well, if she's really missing you, why don't you go home and surprise her? I mean, it'd be a great surprise for her, and then the next day you can go back on the road again. And I was like, this is like the universe talking directly to me now. It's not just like some vague thought in the back of my mind that, you know, I'm ignoring sometimes. It's there, vocalizing itself. And I thought, okay, I gotta follow synchronicity. So I thought, why not? So we're driving along, and about 10 minutes into the journey, we do the socially acceptable thing. What do we do for a living? And he said, I work for military intelligence. And I was like, ooh, another military type. And I only told him a little bit about what I did. So I do dream workshops that help people understand their dreams and blah, 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 blah. And he then suddenly starts talking about Edward Snowden. Everybody know Edward Snowden? Quite a few of you. So Edward Snowden used to work for military intelligence in the US. He released a lot of classified documents to WikiLeaks and got in a lot of trouble. He's now, I think, still residing in Russia. And, and the US is not happy. So anyhow, so because he's in the military, and he was very much against what Snowden did, he called Snowden a traitor and all this other stuff, and first thing that came to my mind, and I said to the guy, again, not to be forceful, I just said, Mark Twain, have you heard of Mark Twain? He goes, yeah. I said, okay, well, Mark Twain's, like one of America's biggest philosophers. And Mark Twain had this expression that, the sign of a true patriot was someone who protected their country from their own government. And I said, you know what? The US government and the British government got us into Iraq based on lies. And I sort of just left it at that. And then within another 5 minutes or so, when he chirped back in, he goes, you know what? I think Tony Blair's a war criminal. I was like, whoa! That's a fast transition. I said, what happened to the status quo? He obviously wouldn't speak like that, at his work, because they won't tolerate that sort of, different perspective. But again, through me being myself, through me, sort of not just being willing to be under that hypnotic trance that, society wants us to be under, so we become less animated human beings. less animated beings in general. You know, that's what trance is. It's a reduction in animation. It gets you into a state where you're almost inanimate, and then the suggestions and the induction process can begin even further. And so for a lifetime, we're under this sort of mass hypnosis. And the hypnotist is all of us. We're constantly sort of drilling ideas into each other and forcing our beliefs on each other and not being very loving most of the time. And so anyhow, just once again, within a short period of time, this guy, I think, felt that he was in company where he could actually be himself. He didn't have to be that guarded individual where if he said the wrong thing, he'd get fired or thrown in the brig or whatever would happen to him. He knew he was in company that a part of him knew he could deeply trust. And for the next 3.5 hours that I was driving with him, this guy almost became like a spiritual master. He had all this amazing knowledge, but it had just been suppressed because of his job. Suppressed because of society saying that's not how it's going to be for this job. That's not how it's going to be for this, bit of existence, this part of your life. And he literally forced that stuff down. But the moment he knew he was in good company where he could relax, the space was being held, he opened up and he was allowing himself to be more loving. We even got past the Tony Blair as a war criminal stuff and started seeing that, somewhere inside Tony Blair there's a good person, but if all of us are just there thinking he's a war criminal and not being willing to see the goodness in people, we're just adding more to the problem. And it gets to a point sometimes in spiritual circles, people say, don't even look at the news, don't even look, you're just going to add more energy to it. What I'm saying isn't saying don't look, because I think in not looking, there's nothing transcendent about not looking. That's just denial. The reason we usually don't look is because we have so much fear we don't know what to do. We don't feel, who am I, one person, what difference can I make? There's a lot of difference we can make if we just learn to show up. Show up for each other, show up for yourself, show up for each other. If we can just more start to do that, that's what's going to change this more than anything else. It's a change of mind. Before we change the world, we have to change our minds. As Einstein would say, all the problems that we now face in the world, we seem to be trying to solve the problems from the level of effect. We will not solve any problems from that level. We have to solve it from the level of cause. That means that whatever effect we're experiencing, we have to think a new level of thoughts, beyond the thinking that got us to that place. It's like they say in AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, it's your best thinking that got you here. Now you have to have a new level of thinking and feeling and doing and being to get yourself out of this place. Shall we take, Joe, shall we take a break?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, great. Thanks ever so much, Todd. If we all come back in about 20 minutes at 9:35, that'd be